Here are the colors we're using today. We have white, primrose, yellow, violet pink, purplish red, dark plum, periwinkle blue, spring green, chromium oxide green, and moss green. Then there's the French gray, which I shook my finger at, do not use. Hello everyone. Today I am inking and painting an El Nino Chitalpa. Now I've never seen one of these plants or bushes or trees. They grow different ways in different climates. I've never seen one in real life, but I watch a ton of gardening YouTube videos, and several of my favorite garden people have purchased these and have been growing them for 2 or 3 years, and I've been fascinated by the things that they've said about them. And I looked them up, and their flowers are beautiful. I wanted to get a closer look rather than just what I saw in the videos. So I Googled and looked it up, and I thought, man, those really are pretty. And I'm going to take a go at trying to sketch them with my ink pen in my journal and then paint them. And it has turned out to be one of my absolute favorite things I've ever done. Now here I'm not looking. What I try to do is not look at a picture and sit there and try to copy it line per line, item per item. But I do look at multiple pictures of whatever it is that I want to draw, and I just really study it, and I say, God, help me to see. Help me to see the lines, help me to see the colors, help me to see the movement. And so as I'm studying the product, or as I'm studying the object, I am praying at the same time, and I'm asking God to help me see. And that has really changed my artwork, just taking a little bit of time to pray about it and to ask God to help me see. So I did that a lot, and then I shut it all down and I just started to sketch. And I do this a lot. I don't ever want to be accused of copying someone's photograph. And I really want my own take on things. So that's why I take extra time to study ahead of time.
Skies are vague blue, come my way. My room is a mess, it could use a hand. My favorite TV shows are capturing. I know I must get it right, must get back in the fight.
Now I'm taking what is called violet pink, and I'm adding that in on the little buds. And I believe that when I'm doing it, I think it's a little too pink. It seems like the flowers have a little bit of a purple cast to them. So I'm taking my periwinkle blue and I'm adding just a tiny bit on top of the pink. When I add the water with my water pen, it will blend those two colors together and create an entirely different color. And that is one of the cool things that I love about these particular watercolor pencils, is that you can color the colors together, add the water, and they blend on the paper. Now I'm going to do a video soon, I hope, that I'm going to order different watercolor pencils. I'm so spoiled to Caran D'Ache. They go on creamy. They don't leave streaks like I've heard a lot of people say that watercolors do. And that's why a lot of artists veer away from watercolor pencils, is because they claim that they're streaky. And I do not experience that with the Caran D'Ache. They're so creamy. But I want to try some other pencils, and I want to do a comparison to see how they actually do. Here I've taken my purplish red and added just a little extra around the edges of the blossoms. Then I took my primrose, which is really an off-white or a cream, and I colored that in the center. I have found that with watercolor pencils, if I go ahead and use the white, or actually I hardly ever use the white, I use the primrose a lot because it is an off-white and looks more natural. If I put that where I need the white to go or the light to go, it kind of protects that paper. We can leave the paper and let that be our white, but this is watercolor pencils, and so that primrose or that off-white is a watercolor. And with Caran D'Ache, once you activate it with water, it's very similar to what I've heard ink tints do, and they really cling to that spot and they protect it. So I could do a glaze over it and I could get rid of that color, but I kind of like putting the cream down and then putting the colors up to it, and it kind of holds that white space for me. Now maybe it's just a technique that I've gotten used to, and I'm protective of that, as well as allowing the primrose to protect it. But I like to add that primrose in there. I think it does add something, and it gives the white area a genuine color of whiteness, or not even sure. I'm stumbling for words, so please, I apologize. Going back and adding the purplish red just on the bottom. You don't have to be precise. All you're doing is laying down pigment. Now I'm adding a little bit of that purple, or that permanent periwinkle blue, excuse me, I had to look down at my colors again, over the pink, and it's all going to blend together. Now I'm taking my Pentel water brush, and that is the small one. I've gotten to, even though I had a set of several, I used the small one and the large one, and I just repeat that. They're the ones I need. I need a small one for tight areas like this, and then I need the large one for large areas. Now I've only added in the pink, so I'm going over and I'm activating the pink. Then I will go back in and add my greens. Now you'll see that it looks like there's a little bit of a green cast up there, and I think that's because there was a little bit of green from a previous project left in my pencil, and you can see here it's pretty well gone by now. And I'm just activating those colors. I don't have a lot of water on it. I don't flood it. It's really very similar to just having a damp paintbrush, and I like it because I'm not constantly having to dip and blot and worry about too much water. I do have other watercolor pens, and I've tried several, even the Caran D'Ache watercolor pens. What I have found is that these Pentel watercolor pens are absolutely the best for what I do. I do not squeeze them unless I'm flushing them, like you see me do sometimes over on my paper towel or my cloth there to get the color out and flood it. I just allow gravity and the working of the pen to apply enough water, and it does. I don't have to really worry about it unless I'm really wanting to do a wet on wet and I want to flood a little more water in there. But I have found that I really don't have to do that. It just always adds enough moisture to activate the watercolor pencils, and then it's always still damp if I want to go back and do a wet on wet around the edges or different places. Once I've got all of that activated, then I just take my watercolor pencil and my wet pen there and just draw color off of the tip of the watercolor pencil and then dab it in the moist area for a wet on wet effect. Here I'm going around and I'm activating all of the pink, and now here's a place that I put the primrose in. All of the large flowers have primrose in the center, and you can see that it reserves that center and keeps it light. One thing about these pencils, they don't apply so much water that it floods the area and moves the pigment around a lot. It really seems to only apply enough moisture to activate the pencils and smooth them out. Now I'm going back and I'm taking spring green and I'm going in around the pink on the buds. Now, one thing to keep in mind is pink and green make brown. It's the same as red and green makes brown. But allowing the pink to activate and then dry, I can come in with a green, go around the pink, and then when I paint it, it will stay where it's supposed to stay, and the pink is already fixed where it's going to stay. And I like doing this. I can do lots of different combinations that normally would go brown, and if you do them one at a time, then you can usually keep them apart and they don't mix. Now, if you put too much water, I have had green and actually it was blue and yellow that made a brown. And I put way too much water, was very sloppy with it. But actually it worked okay with the painting I was doing, and it added some added interest. It didn't flood the entire area in a brown color. Now I'm going in and I'm activating the green, and you'll see I'm not being very precious around the pink. It's already fixed, and so the water is not going to move it. And I'm just activating that green with this small tipped brush. I love these too because they're very portable, and I can take my watercolor pencils, sketchbook, and these water pens and go paint anywhere. It's a very easy setup, and the water stays in the pens for a very long time. It's not using a lot of water, and so you don't have to fill up very often. And if you have a water bottle with you, because I usually do, I drink a lot of water, if it does run out, I can just simply fill it up. Now I'm going down and I'm adding more of the green to the lower part. And a lot of times when I'm doing stems and greenery, I don't fill the entire thing in. I pretty much do on this one because it's such a tiny little stem. It'd be very, very hard to knot. But mostly when I'm doing stems, I like to put a variety of colors in them. Of course, I like to put green, and then I like to come along and add just highlights or a little bit of accents of darker green. Sometimes you'll notice stems have red in them, so I'll put a little red or burgundy. So when you're painting stems, keep in mind that if you leave a little white space to begin with, you may want to leave it that way. That adds a lot of character and texture, but you may want to come in later and dab in other colors. Now I'm using chromium oxide green. It's a kind of a dull green. It's got a little bit of maybe a sagey quality to it, something to add a variation there. There's quite a contrast between that and that bright spring green, and I'm only putting it on the edges. I do this a lot. I layer my leaves with lots of different colors of green and yellow, and I think it gives it such texture and interest. So I'm just going in, doing the sides, and I probably will come back and put all these colors in again. This is a first layer, and that's one of the cool things about watercolor, is that it is meant to be layered, usually in light layers. I don't always do that. Sometimes I get aggressive and go in dark, and I'm adding this around the stems and the little buds, because the Chitalpas, the El Nino Chitalpas, El Nino Chitalpas are very dense and bushy flowers, and they have a lot of greenery, so you'll very rarely see one by itself unless you've plucked it off. Now I'm using moss green to go in there and add another layer and variant to the leaves and the foliage behind there. In all, I think I probably use 3 or 4 different green colors to make this. I love the dimensional colors of using all the different colors. Now I'm going in with yellow, and that is just regular yellow, and I'm going down the center. I do yellow down the centers of my leaves a lot. In fact, almost every single time. It blends in, but that gives that center a little bit of a glow, a little bit of light. And if I'm not drawing in verbatim the veins down the center of the flowers, then that yellow, oh my gosh, the yellow kind of gives the illusion that there is a vein right down the center, even though I've not drawn it in. So now I'm activating those leaves, and you can see that with all the colors I've added, there's a lot of texture, a lot of variance, and they blend very, very well with the green in the buds that I've already put in. And you can see the different layers, the different greens, the darker greens on the very edge, and then it bleeds into an almost colored ombre to the yellow on the inside. Actually, the right side of the leaves is almost white, and it's just fades over to the ink with just some white space, actually, in a lot of places. And I'm just blending all those colors with that brush. I love doing that. It gives it a soft wash, gives it a wet on wet appearance without having to put water down and then add each individual color. So that's what I'm doing now.
I will run 10,000 miles and more. I will give my eyes. If you lost your sight, I will run through.
I have thought about why I use what I use and how to know. Often when I'm coloring in with the watercolor pencil, it looks so different from what the end result will be. It's not like picking up actual paint, and then knowing that that magenta or that green is going to be very similar to the paint you've pulled off your palette. With the watercolor pencils, as you color them on or lay the pigment down, it looks completely different. So a lot of times it's trial and error, and I've experimented and painted things and not knowing if those colors were going to layer well, if I was putting 2 or 3 colors down in conjunction with each other, and would they blend, would it be a mess? So a lot of it is just operating by faith and hoping that the colors you're laying down are going to blend right. And then there is the question of how much pigment do I put down? You do not need a lot of pigment. These are highly pigmented watercolor pencils, and it takes very, very, very little pigment. And if it often is, it's too light the first go around, that's a good thing, because they layer so beautifully, and you can always add layers, but it's a little challenging to try to take pigment away. Here I'm taking chromium oxide green, which we've used previously, and it's the kind of the middle color of the 3 greens, primary greens that I've used. And I'm just adding kind of a background, painting negative space around those stems to give the illusion of shadow or dense foliage behind, and I believe it really sets the painting off. Now, this is another way I love to paint with these watercolor pencils. Once I have laid down the initial pigment, I can go back and add detailed bits. This is a very tight area, so I'm just getting the tiniest little pigment off and putting it in those small places. Now, I could take that pencil and color those places in, but I'm wanting to be a little more controlled about what I lay down. And this is the small pen, and it's moist, it's not wet. And when I tap it to the pencil end, it picks up the very slightest bit of pigment, but it's all the pigment I need for what I'm doing. You'll notice it's just a light little tap. If I had a bigger area that I needed a lot of pigment, then I would scrub it a little bit more and get more pigment on my brush. But now I'm just going in very closely and painting in the background. My goal for this is to make the darkest areas closest to the stem or the center of the flower, and then fade out the intensity or the darkness of the green as it gets closer to the outside. And so that's why you see it's real dark in the center, and then it does fade out. here's a very good example of using wet on wet with the watercolor pencils. I painted in the initial green, and then I applied more water, feathering that green out, and then I took more pigment from the pencil and dropped it into the wet area.
Maybe I need a break. Maybe that's why I fade into this bitter taste. I think I'll let it be.
And I'm just continuing to use that green, go back over and darken. It's so much better to just build up those layers a little at a time to get them just the way you want them, rather than to try to go in dark from the beginning. Now I'm adding a little bit more to the leaves there. Just while I have this green, I'm applying it everywhere that I think it would enhance the painting.
Weighted down by armor, you don't need that protection. I will walk on glass, I will run 10,000 miles and more. I will give my eyes. If you lost your sight, I will run through fire. I will carry you through the heat. I will do it all again. If you needed me to, wish that I could take away your pain like sunbeams in the rain. Oh, we're family. Wherever you go, I'll follow. Whatever you do, I'll handle. I will walk on glass. I will run 10,000 miles and more. I will give my eyes. If you lost your sight.
I'm often using this color or this shade to give the illusion of shadow. I will darken it a little bit later. There's a little more wet and wet. I put the first pigment down, it was damp, and now I'm adding more darker pigment in there, close to where those leaves overlap, to indicate that one leaf is underneath the other. And you can see how immediately that makes it stand out. I'm adding just a glimmer of that darker paint on that other side. I like having the edges darker. Not always, but that's kind of how I roll. Yellow lighter in the middle and then darker on the outsides. Sometimes I make the base of the leaves really dark and feather it out, and then sometimes I'll make the tips a little darker. If you make the base and the tip a little darker and feather it into the middle, it gives an illusion that the middle is raised. The darker parts seem to recede backwards, and it leaves that middle section looking somewhat closer to you and more elevated. Many of these strokes now seem rather bold and in your face, but keep in mind that watercolor pencils as well, dry lighter than what they look like at this point. So even though these strokes look very, very bold, they will fade and they will look very nice. For the most part, I'm showing this video at real time. I did speed up the inking process in the beginning because I think that gets a little boring sometimes. But often I speed the videos up just for sake of time so that you don't have to sit there and watch the slowness of how I paint. But I wanted to put this one out real time. You have the choice to speed it up if you would like. You can put the little gear and do like 1.5 times or something like that. But I think it's important to allow you to see in real time my painting process. I know for myself, when I'm watching tutorials, I appreciate when an artist does slow it down and put it out real time. It gives me more of an idea, their brush strokes and the care that they take. Sometimes we lose the care that is being given to the painting. When we speed it up, we think they're just slopping down the paint willy-nilly, when in reality they're not. Now this is back to purple red, I believe. Now I'm taking dark plum, grabbing just a tiny bit off of the pencil, and I'm putting it on the very ends and kind of bleeding it in. I want you to notice that all of the layers, how they're giving this painting depth. The greenery is starting to just pop off the page, and now adding this darker pigment on the ends of the flowers will begin to really give them some dimension. So I'm putting the darker pigment on the edges, and then I'm using water from the water brush to give it some space, give it some water to bleed into.
Thought I was under your spell, but looking back, I was cursed. You left me to drown and sail away on your ship, but I don't give a damn, it's water under the bridge. Will you take a look at
This is one instance where I do allow the water brush to be a little wetter than normal, because I do want to flood that area with a little bit more water. I don't dry it off. I take it over to the paper towel, and then I squeeze to let the water come through. I may tap it one time, or I may not. I may just let that water drip off, and then I come over and I start where I've laid the pigment down, and then I brush it in toward the, or out toward the place that I want it to fade to.
tears of joy? Yeah. 'Cause baby, all I've cried are tears of joy.
The silicone bristles of these water pens are very durable, and I can scrub, I can use it. If you saw on that last little petal, I laid that pigment down and then I basically shoved that brush up into the pigment and pulled it back as I drew the pen back. There I go again, scrubbing basically to get that pigment to flow the way that I want it. If you do that with one of your good brushes, and you can use them that way, but you need to be careful. But if you use those good brushes to do that, they will wear out very quickly. They are high quality, but they're made to be precious a little bit. And if you go to scrubbing and doing various things, they won't last as long as they normally would. And that is one thing. And here you can see I'm just jabbing that thing down in there. So that's another kind of cool thing about these water pens, is that they're tough. Now I'm taking the yellow and I'm just kind of dabbing it in the centers. I'm letting it kind of come out. You can tell that it's basically the flowers are kind of tilted a little bit down, some of them. So the yellow is going to come out. Now I'm taking a tiny bit of watered down French gray to kind of add in there to create a little bit of depth and shadow. I do find that that when it's done, it was so light that it didn't even hardly register. Taking more yellow, accentuating that area. I wasn't happy with that French gray that I had laid down on there, so I had put some yellow over it, and then I took some pink to kind of fade it away, and that's probably why it doesn't show up in the end. Now I do go over the entire thing again in the end with ink, and I do draw or I sketch rather a better line where that was. I'm adding some more pink to the buds. They're a little dull, but I like that for the buds. When it's dry, it's a very subtle pink, and you'll notice that I've left some of those tips a little more white. And again, I love to leave white space rather than just fill every little crook and nanny. Going back over the stem, I think I had missed a little stem there, and so I'm painting that in, adding some different greens to those stems. Now the painting is dry, and you will see how those super dark colors have lightened, the pinks have softened, and I'm adding my characteristic ink sketches again. This is not my ultra fine tip. I have since realized I didn't have that tip on there, and so I have switched this fine tip out and put my ultra fine tip on there. So, but I'm very gently just giving a little delicate ink sketch around it. I love this precious painting, so I'm being a little bit more or a little less willy-nilly with my lines, but I don't want them to follow everything exact, and I don't want them to be thick solid lines. So I'm just very gently adding some sketchy lines around the entire thing.
much, but it's all I have. You know we could run to a place where we belong, but I need you there with me to go on. Sometimes I can't see, but it feels like you're the one who saves me. When I try, but don't succeed. Yeah, it feels like you're the one who saves me. The one who saves me. Morning has broken.
You'll notice here on these petals, I'm actually adding more contour. I'm adding more ruffled places. These petals on these plants are very, very ruffledy. And so where I feel like they were a little too smooth, even though I'm not drawing on the actual paint line, I'm adding more ruffles and definition to the petals. And that's another thing I love so much about ink, is you can do that, and it really doesn't matter that the paint is, whether it's inside or outside of the lines. I do use a Joule fountain pen, but let me encourage you, you do not need an expensive fountain pen to do this kind of line work. In fact, for a long time, I used the micron pens, and if you can search, you can get a pack of them for they're relatively inexpensive, and they go down super fine. Very, very, very fine. There's like a 0.005 or a 0.003, and you can get a range of pen sizes with the microns, and they are waterproof. So let me encourage you to go get a pack of those and give it a try.
I keep holding on for a better day. I lean on you when the world's astray. I left my heart open so you hear my prayer. I left my heart open so you hear my prayer.
Another thing I like to do is to take my white watercolor pencil and just add a few selective white swipes in various places, just to add the tiniest bit of white. Now with this watercolor pencil, it's not going to be a bold and a bright white as if I were adding Dr. P.H. Martin's white, bleed-proof white. But it's very subtle, and I come back and I activate it with the watercolor brush, and it just brings the tiniest bit of light back to the leaves. You'll notice in a lot of my paintings there are white places just to accentuate light, and sometimes I do it with Dr. P.H. Martin's bleed proof white, sometimes I do it with watercolor pencil, and I just love that effect. Sometimes I also use a white jelly roll pen, depending on the painting and the medium I'm using. This had a more delicate and fine texture to the overall painting, and I felt like just a subtle little addition of the white watercolor pencil would give it the light but in a subtle way, rather than what Dr. P.H. Martin or a Jelly Roll pen would do. So I'm just gently adding it in. And I love that contrast of the white up next to the black ink. And now it will fade because it is watercolor as well. So if you put it on and you feel like, oh my goodness, it's just too dark, don't worry, it's watercolor, it'll fade. I'm trying to just brighten up the throats of these little flowers, and some of that shadow that I thought was a good idea to add, I wasn't happy with it. So after doing it to 2 flowers, I went back, or I just left it. And so even if I didn't have that shadow in there, I'm just trying to add some brightness to that very center throat. And I'm just using it and kind of scrubbing at edges. I don't mind that the yellow has gone out. It's not that I'm trying to cover the yellow. I just want to brighten that throat. Whoops, I had too much water on my brush, but I just spread it out and it dissipated, and then I let it dry. Wisdom from above, James 3:16 through 17. For wherever there is jealousy, envy, and contention, rivalry, and selfish ambition, there will also be confusion, unrest, disharmony, rebellion, and all sorts of evil and vile practices. But the wisdom from above is first of all pure, undefiled. Then it is peace-loving, courteous, considerate, gentle. It is willing to yield to reason, full of compassion and good fruits. It is wholehearted and straightforward, impartial and unfeigned, free from doubts, wavering, and insincerity. When I read this verse to journal it, it resonated with me immensely. I read it over and over again. I prayed about it and meditated on it. I know that it seems that we are living in a very controversial time period, and yes, we are. But I was born in 1958. I lived through the 60s. I lived through the 70s. And that was a tumultuous time. So honestly, I can only remember brief reprieves in our history, or my history, where there wasn't a lot of discord and disunity and rebelliousness and disharmony. So as I read this, and it talks about wherever there's jealousy and contention and selfish ambition, there is also confusion, unrest, disharmony, rebellion, and all sorts of evil and vile practices. That was a little shocking to me at first. It lumps all of these these items of selfish ambition, confusion, disharmony, rebellion, and it lumps them in with evil and vile practices. We blow this off a lot. I mean, we look at the protests and the anger. What gets me about so many of the protests is the anger. Now that we have Facebook, it all seems to be amplified, and people get on various social media platforms and they just rant and they rail. And I understand their frustration, and I don't mean to disparage them. I know it's coming from a heart that wants things to change and a frustration at knowing what they can do to help it change. So, how is that evil? Well, I believe when we do that, we are not seeking God before we open our mouth. There's a scripture that says, be slow to speak. And I think if we took that scripture to heart, we would know that that's not going to solve anything. In fact, it severs any unity that there might be. Do we have to agree with the other side? Absolutely not. But let's learn to build bridges instead of tearing them down. The verse 17, it says, but wisdom from above, which comes from Christ, is first of all pure, undefiled. It's peace-loving, courteous, considerate, and gentle. It is willing to yield to reason, full of compassion and good fruits. It is wholehearted, straightforward, and impartial. Now, in order to listen to reason, we have to listen to the other side. Many of us act as though we're fearful to even sit down and have a conversation with the other side. Why do they believe what they believe? We're not going to be tainted by their opinions just because we are compassionate enough, patient enough to sit down and just say, that's an interesting view. Tell me more about why you believe that. That's building a bridge instead of tearing one down. In the end, we don't have to agree, but for us to reach out and ask them a question about their belief, it has softened or diffused the anger. Now, they may still come back at you with a rant, and that's okay, because those of us who are rooted in Christ and draw wisdom from above can be patient, we can be considerate, and we can be gentle. And I think much more of that is needed today. I have been a Christian all my life, and I'm 67. I can't remember a time not knowing Christ. There was a time, yes, I made a formal declaration of that, but I remember him way before that, listening to my prayers. So, in that time, I've made many, many Christian friends and acquaintances, both in church and out of church. And we do not all believe the same. There are many beliefs and thoughts that I hold dear that they do not. So even within the same faith, we're going to have differing opinions. It is not up to me to force my opinion or my belief on them or anyone else. I feel secure enough in what I know and what I believe that it's up to the Lord to show them what they need to know, even if they're dead wrong. But you know what? It might be me who's dead wrong. So let's offer some compassion and patience to those who believe differently than we do. And let's learn to reach out and build bridges rather than sever ties that can never be repaired. So that's some food for thought today. That's something that's been on my mind for a long time. So I hope that you think about that and maybe try to incorporate that in your life. Thank you so much for watching.
They sing hallelujah. I can see though my eyes are all closed. Yeah, he gives me strength to carry on and always lets me know